As of 2021, the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list comprises of murderers, cartel leaders, and other criminals whose acts are so heinous they're unspeakable. Started on March 14, 1950, the FBI's most wanted list has aided the FBI in capturing some of the worst criminals in the history of the United States. Number 5. Thomas James Holden became the first man to ever be placed on the FBI's most wanted list on March 14th of 1950. He was placed on the wanted list for killing his wife and 2 brothers after an argument had broken out. Holden's criminal career goes back much further than just this incident, though. In the 1920s, he was captured for his involvement in train robberies and placed in Leavenworth Penitentiary in Kansas. Unsatisfied with being a prisoner, Holden escaped and went on the run for a few months until police caught up with him again. He was sent back to Leavenworth to serve the remainder of his sentence. He was finally granted parole in 1949 and went on a rampage that would make him the first person to be placed on the most wanted list. Holden had learned nothing from his time in Leavenworth, and his stint had done nothing to deter him from ever going back again. He traveled back to Chicago, Illinois to be with his wife and family. During an argument, he took his wife's life and 2 of her brothers. Details about the argument are unknown, but we do know that his wife had waited faithfully for him to get out of jail, only to be killed by him. After the murder of his wife and her brothers, Holden once again went on the run, this time fleeing to Portland, Oregon. He lived in a trailer and tried to stretch his paychecks as far as they could go. Of course, at the time, the FBI had placed Holden on their wanted list and the pressure was mounting. A tip was made by an anonymous man in Oregon who claimed to have seen a man matching Holden's description living in a disheveled trailer park. The man said that Holden was easily identifiable due to his distinct appearance. Holden had a wide, flat face and was unusually straight-mouthed. The FBI apprehended Holden 13 months after the murder. According to records, he didn't resist arrest and accepted his fate as a captured man. Holden knew that the game was up and agreed to be extradited to Chicago to face multiple trials. For this, he was found guilty and sent to Illinois State Prison in 1951 and passed away just 2 years later. Number 4. Billy Bryant will forever be remembered not for his crimes, but for the fact that he spent the shortest time on the FBI's most wanted list, amassing a wanted time of just 2 hours. On January 8, 1969, Bryant robbed a Citizens Bank and Trust Company of Maryland. He escaped in a maroon Cadillac that his victims were able to identify. Not only were they able to give the description of the getaway car, but they were also able to describe the perpetrator. Not because he had any distinguishing features, but because they knew he'd been arrested for bank robberies before. Bryant wasn't smart in choosing which location to hit, and it appeared that he didn't wear a mask either, giving the bank tellers a good look at his face. In 1968, Bryant had been arrested by the FBI for the robbery of 6 Washington, D.C. banks, for which he was sentenced to serve 18 to 54 years. Just months after being arrested, Bryant escaped from the District of Columbia Department of Corrections in Virginia by crashing a car into the fence and fleeing. He had access to the car as he had been assigned to work in the car shop as part of his prison work detail. As Bryant was a fugitive on the run, the FBI was immediately notified that he'd committed yet another bank robbery, and soon they began to hunt for him around 4 p.m. As Bryant was known by the FBI, 2 agents visited his apartment in southeast Washington, D.C. As they knocked on the door, Bryant opened the door and told them that since it was not his apartment, he couldn't let them inside. Sensing that something was wrong, Bryant shot at the FBI officers who were pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. Bryant had now killed 2 officers, and the hunt for him intensified. His apartment block was soon surrounded, but it turned out that Bryant had escaped through a window and fled on foot. The search for Bryant continued well into the afternoon, and 2 hours later, the Metropolitan Police Department received a call from a resident claiming that he thought there was an intruder in his house as he heard weird noises coming from the attic. The FBI swarmed the apartment on Mississippi Avenue at 6 p.m. and burst inside. They found Bryant inside, desperately trying to break out. After calling out and identifying themselves, Bryant surrendered and was taken into custody. He explained that the noises were caused by him trying to escape after he'd crawled into the loft, but the door was jammed and trapped him inside. Bryant was sentenced to serve 3 life sentences for the murder of the 2 agents, as well as the bank robbery he committed just 3 hours earlier. He was also ordered to serve the rest of his previous sentence with the life sentences running afterward. He was also given no chance of parole. Number 3. Leslie Rogue's criminal career started in the early 1970s after he was arrested and sentenced to Leavenworth Penitentiary for car theft and grand larceny. Like many criminals on this list, Rogue didn't learn his lesson his first time and was later sentenced to 25 years in prison for the robbery of a bank in Florida in 1984, though he was suspected to have robbed at least 25 other banks in different states. After spending just a year behind bars, he managed to bribe a prison officer in Utah while waiting to be transferred to a prison in Iowa. The reason for his transfer has never been specified. What we do know is that after he bribed the guard and escaped, he went on to commit even more bank robberies. In January of 1990, Rogue was placed on the FBI's most wanted list and became the 430th fugitive to do so. He would only last 6 years before he was captured. After realizing he was wanted by the FBI, Rogue fled to Guatemala, hoping to start a new life away from the heat of the FBI. That was until he saw that he'd been featured on the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. Fearing that the people of Guatemala may soon recognize him, he surrendered himself to the US Embassy in Guatemala on May 19, 1996. He explained to the officials at the embassy that he was worried about being recognized from the TV shows and that his neighbor had recognized him from the wanted posters that were circulating in Guatemala. Rogue was arrested and charged with armed robbery and escaping. The FBI estimated that during his criminal career, Rogue made off with more than $2 million from 30 banks. After he was arrested and extradited to the US, he was sentenced to serve 65 years at the Sheridan Federal Correctional Institution. Number 2. Leonard Moses has cemented himself in the history books as one of the most wanted fugitives ever after escaping capture for 52 years. In 1968, Moses was wanted for participation in the Pittsburgh riots and for his involvement in taking the life of a 72-year-old woman named Mary Amplo. Moses was quickly apprehended after it was found out that he'd thrown a Molotov cocktail into the home of Mary, causing her to suffer from severe burns and ultimately leading to her death in the hospital. He was convicted of first degree and sentenced to life in prison. However, this didn't quite suit Moses. A few years into his sentence, he was granted compassionate leave so he could attend his grandmother's funeral, and he used this time to plot his escape. Under the guise of a grieving grandson, Moses fled and went on the run. As he was now an escaped fugitive, a federal warrant was put out for his unlawful flight, and the FBI placed him on the most wanted list in July of 1972. Moses was just 18 at the time of his escape, and the FBI knew they had to work hard to create age progression photos, as his appearance could change as he aged. The FBI worked tirelessly for decades, appealing to anyone with information to come forward, promising a $10,000 reward, but nothing concrete ever surfaced. That was until 2019, when he was accused of stealing 80 hydrocodone tablets from a pharmacy he worked at in Michigan. It turned out that since 1999, Moses had been working as a pharmacist and even had a license under the alias Paul Dixon. As hydrocodone is a powerful opiate painkiller, his workplace denied to press charges, and the police were called to conduct a full-scale investigation. CCTV proved that Moses had stolen the 80 tablets, so he was arrested. It wasn't until after he was brought into the police station for processing that he was identified. After taking his fingerprints and cross-referencing them in their system, Michigan police were shocked to find that Moses had a federal warrant out for his arrest. He was turned over to the FBI and was sent back to prison for the murder of Mary Amplo, as well as the unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Moses will continue to serve his life sentence, and due to his age, it's unlikely he'll ever see parole or release. Number 1. After 12 years on the run, the FBI finally caught up with Yasser Saeed, who was wanted for the murder of his 2 teenage daughters. In December of 2007, Amina, Sarah, and their mother Patricia ran away from the home they shared with Saeed in Louisville, Texas. The 3 ran to Tulsa, Oklahoma to start a new life after years of suffering at the hands of Saeed. According to testimony by those who knew the 3 women best, Saeed would stalk and track Sarah and Amina and became violent towards them if he felt that they were not following traditional Egyptian values. Sarah had gotten herself a part-time job to make some extra money while she was studying, but Saeed would regularly stalk and record her, berating her when she got home for being too friendly with male customers and smiling too much. Sarah and Amina confided in friends that they were terrified of their father and worried that they would be placed into arranged marriages and sent back to Egypt. The three women tried to live peacefully and move on with their lives in Tulsa, but Saeed soon found out where they were. On January 1st, 2008, Saeed had managed to convince Sarah and Amina that he wanted to take them out for a meal and apologize for his controlling behavior. Sarah and Amina jumped into his taxi cab waiting to be driven to dinner. Instead, Saeed kissed them, told them that he loved them, and drove them to Irving, Texas, where he pulled into a concealed area and took both of their lives. Sarah managed to call 911 and alert authorities before passing away from her injuries. Saeed went on the run immediately after the murders, abandoning his taxi cab in Irving, Texas. He was placed on the FBI's most wanted list, and members of the public were warned that he may be operating as a taxi driver in New York and Newark. Despite the $100,000 reward for information that led to his arrest, he wouldn't be captured until August of 2020. In August, the FBI released a statement confirming that they had captured Yasser Saeed without incident in Justin, Texas. Saeed was surrounded as he drove his cab by SWAT team members from the Dallas FBI office. Saeed is currently awaiting transfer to Dallas County to await his trial. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.